Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. I'm Megan Hardy, founder of Fitness Uncharted, where we talk about mindset and tactics that are going to help you to build muscle, lose body fat, improve your health, and leave you feeling confident and empowered. I am your host, Megan Hardy, and welcome back, y'all, to episode number 5. Can you believe it? I actually was going to try to look more presentable and professional for my podcast, like everyone else. Everyone always looks so cute and so pretty and whatever. And like their hair's all done and their makeup's on and they look good and ready to go for their YouTube, podcast, right? But here we are, episode number 5, and I look like my usual self, which is AKA no makeup, workout clothes, probably sweaty workout clothes, which they are today, but they've dried out at this point, and also a messy bun or a doo-doo bun, as I like to call it, on top of my head. So that is the look today. But hey, that is real, and that's me. And that's one thing that I want to keep authentic in this podcast is just trying to be real with you guys. So if hopefully you're cool with that, and cool with me looking just like my normal self, I will try to look more presentable most of the time. A lot of times I'm recording on a Sunday, which is usually the one day of the week that I am getting dressed and look presentable for church and whatnot. But if you're not cool with it, then just don't watch me on YouTube. Just go watch or just go listen to this podcast and don't watch me. So anyway, with that being said, I want to use this episode to give you guys an overview of fats versus carbs. And I want to dispel some of the myths that about both, because there's a lot of them. And you're probably confused at this point on how many carbs or how many fats you should have, especially if you're tracking macros or anything like that. And I want to help you make a more informed decision on how much of each to eat for your unique body, because there really isn't a one size fits all approach. And just like anything in health and fitness, like people tend to go to extremes with things, like either extremely high fat or high carb, low fat, low carb, whatnot. And what I've found is most things with health and fitness, it probably falls somewhere in the middle, right? So like we've all heard probably like fats are bad at some point in our life, or carbs are the devil. Like I just blow up like a balloon, or carbs are bad, or like insulin resistance, rah, 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 blah, blah, blah. But again, guys, it's somewhere in the middle, and it's going to differ depending on the person. So before we dive into who should have higher carb or higher fat and whatnot, I want to first just talk about the importance of both. So fats and carbs, they both play a critical role in our overall health and well-being. Let's talk about fats first, okay? I'm going to give you guys just some tidbits on fats, right? First of all, they're essential for our body. We need fats to function. So they are essential for proper brain function. They help keep a steady blood sugar level. When we have those healthy fats, they help keeping us feeling fuller longer. So especially if you're someone who is trying to diet or to reduce calories, yes, fats are high calorie, but they can help giving you sustained energy and feeling full longer. They're also extremely important in providing energy and building cells. And to talk about fat soluble vitamins, literally, we need those fats to help absorb vitamins from our food. So if you're not getting enough fats, you're not going to be able to provide those fats for those vitamins, right? And producing hormones. This is the big one. So I'm leaving that for last because we'll talk about it more, but especially for my perimenopause, menopause ladies, like we need those healthy fats for producing hormones. We all need enough fats. And there's 3 types of fats. So we have our saturated, we have our monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, which all of those would be kind of our healthy fats, which there is some debate on the saturated fats. But I will say, if you're eating the right kind of foods with saturated fats, do not be fearful of saturated fat, y'all. We can have a whole other conversation around that. But saturated fats have really been demonized more so than they need to be either. So anyway, I would say are our healthy fats. The trans fats is the kind that we do want to avoid. We want to avoid trans fats like in any of our foods. So if you see trans fat on the label, throw that stuff out, unless if you're having like, that's your treat for the day and you really, really want it. But even still, I would probably try to find a treat that does not have trans fat in it. So those are fats, but we need fat for our healthy lifestyle, well-being, healthy bodies. Carbs, similarly, we need carbs, guys. Sometimes carbs get a bad rep, AKA a lot of the time now. But carbs, y'all, they're essential to keep your brain and muscles working at optimal levels. They are a major source of energy for fueling our everyday activities, and they're needed so that the body won't break down hard-earned muscles to create glucose. So the last thing we want is to be trying to build muscle. You're not providing your body with enough glucose or enough carbs, and then your body starts to actually break down your muscle tissue for that glucose. We do not want that. That's not good. Not for our goals, right? If our goal is to build muscle or to tone up, we don't want that to happen. So we need to feed our body enough carb. There's two types of carbs. There's simple, which is our typical sugar that we think of, like refined carbs, but that's simple sugar. And then there is complex carbs. So that's like your starch or fiber. And so we want to consume complex carbs a majority of the time. If you are going to consume simple carbs or sugars, they can actually be beneficial like post workout. Like that's when after the muscles have been worked, your glycogen stores have been depleted. That would actually be a time that your body could put more of those simple sugars to good use to replenish those glucose stores and to feed, kind of refuel the muscle and to shuttle in like that protein. It could actually be a good time, but I still wouldn't use that as an excuse to go like pound down, a bunch of donuts post workout, because you're still probably going to have more of a crash and not feel great afterwards. There's other reasons to still try to get healthier, like complex carbs post workout. But if you were going to have the simple sugars post workout, could be a time to do it. So most of the time, as a rule of thumb, let's think consume complex carbs as the goal. So those are a couple of reasons to incorporate carbs and fats into your diet. Like we need all three macros. Like I know there's some debate on whether or not they're essential or not, like carbs, if they're essential or not. People from the carnivore diet are like, you don't need them. Like your body will make what you need. Anyway, guys, for health and overall well-being, for hormone production, for a well-functioning body, like we need those three macronutrients. There's a reason why our foods are broken down into protein, fats, and carbs. But there's so many extreme diets that play on either like high carb or low carb or high fat or low fat. Like just think keto being one, right? Where I think most of us are probably familiar with keto. That's extremely low carb and high fat. And with that one, it's like, it's hard to get enough fiber in. A lot of times people really struggle because they are doing such low carb that they're not even getting enough of the healthy complex carbs to get that fiber intake in. They can't even have, I've talked with women who have done keto and they're like, oh my gosh, I would have killed someone for a strawberry or a tomato. And I'm like, that's crazy. Like that you can't have those things. And also guys, it's going to make it a lot harder to get your fiber in, which you need plenty of fiber, one for controlling a healthy weight, but also for proper digestion. Like talk about getting backed up, y'all. If you're having digestive issues on a high fat, low carb diet, there's probably a reason why. I also find a lot of times people with doing a keto diet tend to have higher cholesterol or triglycerides. So, there's those things that come with doing a low carb, high fat diet that are not necessarily pretty. And then there's actually, I'm curious if you guys have heard of this one, a HCLF. HCLF. Has anyone heard of that? That's high carb, low fat. Go figure. Surprise, surprise. Someone has swung the pendulum to the other side of keto, which is low carb, high fat. And there's actually a diet that is high carb, low fat. I think this is actually more so a vegan diet, which would make sense because vegans do tend to eat a lot more carbs. Even to get their protein intake, they have to do a lot more in the kind of carby or, beans and things like that category, even to hit their protein levels. So it would make sense for someone like that. But doing high carb, low fat is not really great for hormone health and insulin sensitivity for some people. So especially talking about that hormone health, again, earlier, we said we need enough fats for healthy hormone production. So again, you're kind of playing with fire a little bit by doing that high carb, low fat. And then we've got carnivore, which is basically all protein, more or less. It's meat, it's fish, it's dairy, animal products. Like it's pretty restrictive. And the main thing is like, there's like no fiber in this diet. So you're also getting inadequate nutrients in the sense of not getting those vitamins and minerals that you're getting from other foods that include other healthy fats and carbs. So the focus here with carnivore is not so much high fat, or low fat or high carb or low carb. It's more so just protein and animal products. But you're missing out on some of the things that you would otherwise get from moderate carb and other healthy fats. So I just want to give you guys, a couple examples of when you might want to play with your fat and carb ratios. Like I wanted to kind of share with you those extreme diets that tend to be on the market and that we hear a lot about. But there's a lot of nuance. And again, what is probably best for your body is somewhere in between. But at the end of the day, I don't want y'all to get too hung up on carbs and fats right now. If you listen to the previous episodes then you know our primary focus is first and foremost that you're consuming enough calories. And then number two, that you're consuming enough protein. If you start there and determine, okay, how many calories should I be eating and how much protein should I be eating and start working towards that, then you're moving in the right direction. So focus on that first and then try to fill your fats and carbs with healthy fats. So that's things like think avocado or coconut oil or extra virgin olive oil, filling your fats with those healthy fats, and then complex carbohydrates. So think like your fruits and vegetables, those root veggies are really great too, like your sweet potato, your butternut squash, all that good stuff, and then some whole grains in moderation. If you start there, you are moving in the right direction and you really don't need to get caught up in the nitty gritty of how many fats, how many carbs. But I do want to give y'all some scenarios where it might be best to do like either higher fat or higher carb. So first and foremost, let's talk about when you might want to do higher fat and lower carb. So first scenario would be as a perimenopause or menopausal woman. For hormone production and as we age, our carb needs tend to decrease and our fat needs might increase a little bit. And again, this is just for that healthy hormone production. And I'm not talking anything crazy here. Like I'm not talking keto by any means or stretch of the imagination. So don't get it twisted. But we're talking more so like if you were doing macros, think of a macro split of like 35% protein, like 27% carb and let's see, like 38% fat. So nothing extreme, but you can see carb is a little bit on the lower side and then fats are a little bit increased. You might find that your body responds really well to that as you are having those hormonal changes through perimenopause and menopause. So if you are tracking your full macros, give that a go. And that might work well for you. The other situations where you might want to do higher fat and lower carb could be with conditions like PCOS or diabetes, any of those kind of conditions that also often have insulin resistance. But what you will find too here is, and what I found with clients is that you still don't really necessarily need to do low carb or super low carb, definitely not for a long extended period of time, maybe for shorter periods, or you might just need to do more so like limiting of the refined carbohydrates. That tends to be the main killer is those refined sugars and carbohydrates. If you can remove those out of your diet, you're going to be moving in the right direction. But again, with someone with one of those conditions, you might benefit from a little bit higher fat, lower carb. And then last but not least, let's talk about time of your cycle. If you are a menstruating woman, or if you're maybe doing some kind of carb cycling, the first week of your period when hormones are low would be a good time to do higher fat and lower carb. When hormones are low, that's a good time to do it. When your hormones are higher, you don't want to do it lower carb. So we'll talk about that next. But so that think of your first week of your period. If you're someone who is tracking your cycle, like I use a Natural Cycles, the app to track my cycle. And the first day, and even if you're not actually tracking your cycle, you can determine this just based off the first day of your period is day one of your cycle. So whenever you start your bleed, that is day one. And those first like 10 days would actually be a good time to do a little higher fat and a little bit lower carb. If you are trying to do higher fat, low carb, or if you're maybe doing something like carb cycling, that could be a good time to work it in with your hormones. And then let's move on to when you might want to do higher carb and lower fat. So one, you might want to do higher carb, lower fat if you're trying to build muscle. So I find especially younger women can get away with a bit lower fat intake to make room for the extra carbs. So kind of the opposite of the perimenopause, menopausal woman who might benefit from a little bit higher fat, a little lower or moderate carb. Someone who is younger or just if you are someone who is trying to build more muscle, you might benefit from a little bit higher carb and a little bit lower fat intake. And again, I'm not talking extremes like the extreme diet, the HCLF, where you're doing like really high carb, really low fat. Just talking like moderately, higher carb and moderately lower fat. Another situation would be if you are dealing with a lot of stress, this is not someone who wants to do low carb. We need carbs. Carbs actually increase our production of serotonin, which is our body's like feel good hormone and feel good or chemical. And it can help shut off that stress response. So carbs actually help with shutting off the stress response. They help with recovery, especially after a strenuous workout. Like your body does not know when you stop working out just because you freaking stopped working out. You have to tell it. So, using breathing techniques can help, stretching can help. And then also that meal after your workout help signal to your body, hey, she's done working out. I can calm down now. And carbs are a part of that process. So having enough protein for building more muscle, getting the carb intake in can shut off that body's like stress response, because working out also creates inflammation and stress in the body. Even if it's a good stressor, it is creating more kind of stress in the body. So carbs can help with recovery. Along with that, if you're someone who is doing like a lot of CrossFit or a lot of high intensity exercise, you probably want to do a little bit higher carb to help combat that and to help with your recovery. So you can see where the nuance lies, because let's say you're a perimenopause or menopausal woman, but you're doing a lot of CrossFit or a lot of high intensity exercise. Well, what should you do, high fat or high carb? You can see where the nuance comes in, right? Because there's not one size fits all approach to this. It's finding what works best for your body based off of your lifestyle, your workout regimen, the season of life that you're in, your hormones, how much recovery or stress that you're under, or how much recovery you need. All of that comes into play. So I'm just kind of giving you a couple like rules of thumb, and then we can help you find that like happy place for your body. Some of it is kind of trial and error, just trying to see what works best for your body, what makes you feel best, and being your own body scientist here. So playing around with your carbs and fats until you find what really works best for you. And then along with when you might want to do higher carb, lower fat, if you are, again, doing like carb cycling or you're interested in doing higher carb, a good time of your cycle to do that would be the week before your period. So that week leading up to your period, to give your body all the complex carbs during that time. That's going to actually help you with healthy progesterone production. Your body needs enough carbs and enough glucose to create progesterone. So if you're not giving it that, then you might not have enough progesterone. You might find yourself with low progesterone or even some estrogen dominance happening. And that's where you're going to see a lot more of those like PMS symptoms occurring. So think like tender breasts, or breast sounds so formal, like tender boobs, right? Let's just say boobs on here, or even think spotting, like if you are having some spotting around your period or before your period, if you're having like more acne or cramps or bloating, all of those unfavorable PMS symptoms often tends to be a estrogen dominance issue and or a progesterone, deficiency in progesterone, and we need enough carbs. So that week before your period is a good time to actually up that carb intake. And what is so interesting, you guys, is that our bodies actually become a little bit more insulin resistant the week before our period, which is so interesting. That's actually your body's response trying to get your body to hold on to more of that glucose and to keep it around longer. So if you find yourself where you're craving carbs that week before your period, well, guess what? That's literally your body telling you like, hey, Megan, I need those for progesterone. Like I need carbs right now. So give it those carbs during that time. I actually, personal experience or personal story, I used to really struggle bad with spotting around my period. Like I swear I would have my period, but then I would also spot like 2 other weeks out of the month, just random blood or bleeding, and a lot of spotting. Also would have really tender boobs around my period. Definitely some bloating, mood swing stuff, acne for sure. And as I actually learned more about this, and I was like, oh, I actually need to like use nutrition to my advantage to help with my PMS symptoms, and I need to give my body the carbs that it's asking for the week before my period, I actually noticed those things go away almost completely. Now my period like sneaks up on me. I hardly even know it's coming. And I don't struggle with those symptoms anymore. So that week before your period, like eat the carbs, girl. But I would say try to stick again to those complex carbs, because if you're eating all the refined sugar, the donuts and the pizza and the doo-doo carbs, you're going to feel like doo-doo. So try to stick with the complex carbs, your fruits, your veggies, your whole grains. But guys, I seriously, the week before, I'm like, give me all the bananas, give me all the apples, give me the pineapple, give me some whole grains, give me a little bit more of that whole grain bread. Like I allow myself those carbs to kind of my body satisfaction, without, with still trying to stay within my calories and hitting my protein and all that good stuff. But I'm okay with a little bit higher carb. And I notice the months or that I don't do that week leading up to my period is always worse and my PMS symptoms are worse. So I actually just had another situation with a client recently who she started eating better leading up to her period. And she was like, oh my gosh, my PMS symptoms are like nearly gone. Like I literally didn't know I was starting my period until it started because I was bleeding. So needless to say, what you're eating up to your period makes a huge difference, but try to stick with those complex carbs and also other nutrient dense foods, your proteins, your healthy fats, all that good stuff. So to wrap all of that up into a nice little pretty bow, because I know that was a lot of information, and just to make this less confusing, don't worry about the specific fat carb ratios or macros to start out. If you are trying to, like compete in a bodybuilding competition, or let's say you're getting down to that last percent of body fat that you want to get off, then the exact macros will become more important. But for right now, just try to eat enough calories, eat enough protein, eat those healthy fats, like we talked about, like your avocado, your coconut oil, your olive oil, some nuts and seeds in moderation, things like that. And the complex carbs, those fruits, those veggies, those whole grains, those root vegetables, like eat those. And if you do that, I guarantee you will start to see positive changes. And if you're someone who is looking to go to that next level of tracking macros or getting down to that last percent of body fat, whatnot, yeah, you might want to set some specific carb and fat ratios or targets to hit as far as a percentage or grams. But if you just start with the healthy fats, the complex carbs, working with your cycle, you're off to a really, really good start. So that is it for this episode. Keep it short and sweet for you guys. Thank you for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next one. Hopefully looking, a little bit more presentable than I do today. Maybe not. We'll see. But anyway, thank you guys for coming, and let's make it a great day.